Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Maybe you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us today is an author with a story that sounds completely like out of fiction, like it's so impossible to understand, and yet every word that we will talk about is absolutely true. Now, who is my guest today? Is going to be telling us this incredible story. Well, she's always been fascinated by people and how their life journeys have influenced them as individuals. And traveling as a child all over the world, she witnessed sites such as the ruins of Machu Picchu in Peru, the Mayans in Mexico, and even climbed through the catacombs of a 14th-century church in Brazil. Now, this love of history was instilled in her by her father, a passion they continue to share to this day. And in the third grade, she developed an obsession with reading autobiographies. With a runaway imagination, she often picked books about people she wanted to learn more about. The questions she thought to answer included whether they were happy, whether they experienced tragedy, whether they had families of their own, and where their lineages originated. Ultimately, her love of reading and natural curiosity led her to develop a desire to write stories, specifically fiction, based upon true events. And in this interview, viewers and listeners, we're going to be talking about a story that I have no words to share because it's just so incredible and so daring. And to join us now to tell us all about it and the behind the scenes, let's give a huge round of applause to our guest today, author Kimberly Blaine. Kimberly, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome, Kimberly. Awesome. I am so excited to have you here on the show. Now, since this is your first time on The Wandering Scribe, can you give our viewers and listeners a teaser of the book we'll be talking about today, which, as we talked about off camera, is a story that needs to be told?
Yes. This was something that my family actually experienced, and I have only been able to discuss it as of 3 years ago and announce that it was our family story. The book is called Carrasco 67, A Harrowing Tale of an Imperialist Pig. When I first wrote it, when I finally, after years of harassing my father, um, he finally gave me permission to write the book, but he had criteria. I had to leave out certain storylines that were very identifying. I had to write under a pen name, and I had to change all the names in the book. So the only true names in the book are the CIA operative that played a big part in our help, Dan Mitrione, and our dog Loba. So everything was changed. I used that pen name of Elaine Brown. I actually, I was very stubborn. I wanted to have a part of me in it. So I used my real middle name, and I changed the spelling of my maiden name. So that's how that came about. So, and then the rest was a lot of years of interviewing the family. I did it for 5 years. I knew I had to get this story right. So I interviewed and I studied the history for 5 years. And then I spent another 5 years actually writing it. Because I'd get these late night phone calls and they go, "Oh, I remembered something else." This was my father. And he would tell me, and even when I was ready to go to press, he called me one night late and said, "I remembered something else." And I had to pull it back because I had to include it because it was too incredible to leave out. So it was things like that happened. So yeah.
And believe me when I tell you, viewers and listeners, I had a chance to learn a little bit more about this book. And again, I am still in disbelief of the true story behind this and what actually happened. I don't want to spoil anything. We're going to be talking a little bit more about the
Mhm.
book and trying to be not as spoilery as possible so that way you can experience it yourself. But
Exactly.
yes. So before we dive into the construction of the book as well as the behind the scenes of what actually happened, Kimberly, I am very curious. So in your bio, you've always been a reader and someone who's always loved history, especially, traveling all over the
Mhm.
world. And I'm very, very curious. Was there a specific moment in your life, a definitive aha moment that made you consider telling, a story down the road, even if it might not have been this story in particular?
Actually, there was, and it's going to seem a little crazy. Um, it was within the year after we escaped, and what actually was happening to us, or actually happening to me, was because we were forbidden to discuss what happened with ourselves, amongst ourselves, or even tell any friends or any family to protect their safety. Um, it started playing mind games on you, because then you wonder, did we really experience what we did? Did it really happen? Am I having weird mind games going on? And so I was in um, my closet, and I was trying to find something. And out I pulled my old uniform shoes, the shoes I was wearing when a kidnapping attempt was about to go down on me.
Mm.
And it was like Pandora's box exploded, and because I have a rather eidetic memory. A lot of people wonder, how did I remember all this stuff? Well, one, yes, I did interview the members. I interviewed the members of my family because I wanted to know their personal experiences when I wasn't with them. That was the key thing. As far as myself, I can remember down to details of the drapery, all the little details on that that I experienced. So when I held those shoes in my hand, they were the only thing I had left besides the patch that I wore in my uniform. My mother got rid of everything that could possibly identify us in connection with Uruguay. So we didn't have decorations in our home, nothing. It was like we were cutting out our existence from that time, because we didn't know who we were inviting into our home that we would meet. We and that would report back, because they knew we had family in Dallas, so they figured we'd be in Dallas, and we were. So they were going to go through the schools and try and find us through that way. And so even at our schools, my father had to let them know not to divulge. They just said there was an issue for our protection. Do not ever refer to her last name anywhere, So there were measures in place.
Mm.
So that was another aspect of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
insane. Now, before we dive into the creation of this book, I would like to know if you are comfortable, Kimberly, giving us at least an overview of the real life events that led to the creation of this book of yours.
Absolutely. So my father was exceptionally ahead of his time for in the accounting world. He was kind of like the golden child for his era. He was the youngest partner, and the youngest man to control an entire area in a country amongst their profession. And he was working with the top two one of the top two accounting firms in the worldwide. And so he was in charge of the Uruguayan operation, and he was trying to court a huge client that would help raise the level of their company there in Uruguay. So this gentleman came to his office, and he all of a sudden, halfway through, as my father was giving him a tour of the building, became very withdrawn, shut down, became very nervous, and he cut their visit short. But he said, call me, or come see me in the morning, was what he said, was come see me in the morning. So he left. And shortly after, my father received a phone call from him. And it was the time that it took for the man to return to his own office. And he asked him, who was this man? And he described him in the office. And my father said, well, he's been with us the past year. He has excellent, recommendations. He's done excellent work for us and so on. And he said, okay, good. And he said, can you come to my office? So he showed up the next day, and he closed the door, and then he began whispering. And he goes, do you know who that man is? And he goes, yes, his name is this. He goes, that's not his name. He goes, that is so-and-so. And he goes, that is a Tupamaru terrorist. And he's working infiltrated in your company. And he's going to do the same thing he did to my family. He goes, he blackmailed us. And in order to keep my family alive, we paid a ransom. And so that's where it started. So my father absolutely floored. By the way, he did get him as a client, but he went back, spoke with the attorneys of the office, and in a big secret meeting, and they decided to observe him for about 3 months. So they let him just continue working there. They wanted to find out all the accounts that he had his hand on, because that was embezzling, that, encompassed stealing from refactoring documents, all those sorts of things. So they did that. They got enough information, and he was fired. That's when the nightmare began. They didn't like that. He began blackmailing my father and threatening our family. But it was just threats at that point. So, but it still unnerved my father. So he set up a sting with the police to capture him after hours at his office, giving the terrorists the impression that he was coming to collect the ransom. And that was what set everything off, because we exposed one of their guerrillas. And by doing so, it incensed the Tupamaru organization, and they put out a death sentence on our family. And on top of that, there were Tupamarus infiltrated everywhere. You'd find doctors, lawyers, police officers in all facets. That's how they stole. They did basically corporate criminal activities to fund, and then it progressively became more aggressive, more violent. And so the death sentence was a game changer. Our lives after that became hell, as an underscore.
My goodness, Kimberly. My goodness, I cannot even imagine what you and your family went through during those moments, and then escaping, and then not being able to talk about it, for your own safety,
Right.
believing that, are there agents here in, in the US, and just trying to live as, normally as possible, like nothing ever happened, that there
Right.
was an incident, it happened, but now we must move on. And then only recently being able to talk about it.
Mhm.
And I am just blown away by your story and how you were able to take that, and of course change the names of the people involved, but still get the story out there, which leads to my first two questions. What ultimately is the near desire you want to satisfy for your reader, as well as the promise that you are making to them? And a bonus question: when writing this book, what was your ultimate goal you had for this book?
Well, the first thing is probably what I experienced my whole life, because even though we couldn't discuss it anymore with anyone and we had to pretend as if it never happened, we still had to live looking over our shoulders. We still, when we were to leave the house, we needed to look out the windows, check and see if everything looked normal. We still had to screen anyone that was around us, be aware if someone was hanging around that you didn't know, that shouldn't be, that maybe kept making eye contact with you, those sorts of things. So our life still continued in a sense of imprisonment, even when I was in high school. So those sorts of things didn't change. By the time I got to high school was when the first time I started relaxing somewhat. I still will always be on guard. That is one thing that doesn't leave me. My children, it drives them crazy. And they said, "Why are you so afraid?" I said, "I'm not afraid, but I'm being smart. I'm always going to be smart about my surroundings and be proactive to security. That will always stay with me." Now, the impetus of all of this was a conversation I had with my mother as a teenager. I approached her one day because she was the only one that began to answer a few of my questions, because every time I brought it up, I was shot down. And so she turned around and because I said I wanted to write the story, and she said, "I would love for you to be able to do that one day, but now that's not going to happen." And she said, "People will never know who we are or who we were, but I want them to know our story." And she felt it important. And I feel it important because there's a lot you can learn from this. And that is, I saw horrific things. I experienced horrific things. My father experienced multiple kidnapping attempts that were in a horrific manner. And the thing is, I learned the strength from my parents, and that is, you can let it define you,
Mm,
or you can address it, acknowledge what happened. Don't shortchange yourself on all the emotional and the feelings and that, because it was horrible.
yes.
But if you give it that strength and that power, you can never be in your present and enjoy your future. And I don't know what it was about me as a kid that I had that gumption, but I remember as a young child that I was very angry at the terrorists. And it started out with, I wasn't going to let them make me scared.
Mm,
And that's kind of where it started. And then as it went on, I realized that that was my empowerment and that I wasn't going to let that affect my whole life. Unfortunately for one of my brothers, we didn't realize he had PTSD from it. And it went undiagnosed all his life because you don't think to look for it in a child. But in his later adult years, they, through doctors and hypnosis and everything, they were able to find out the source of his issues and why he had a difficulty coping in life. And so sadly, you know, that happened, and he developed dementia from it. So he is in the last stages. Luckily, he still knows us, but he suffered from it, you know, tremendously.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So there was a casualty to it. So
That is, again, Kimberly, this story of yours is just so unbelievable. And from a person who's just hearing this for the first time, they would think that this sounds, you know, like fiction, that it just seems so impossible, but yet it did happen. It happened to your family. You guys suffered through it and dealt with all the ramifications, even after leaving, and trying to reclaim your voice in a sense of being able to share it with people for so many years, which actually then leads to my next set of questions. Ultimately, for people now learning about your story and getting a copy of this book, what do you hope readers will gain from this book?
I'm hoping two things. I want them to realize how every moment that you have with your family is, you know, it may sound corny, but it's a gift, because you never know what is going to happen in your life. People think that things like this only happen in the movies. The difference is they do happen, and they do happen frequently. It's out of fear and out of self-protection that you don't hear about these stories. Because if you divulge who you are, where you are, that is a problem.
Yes.
So that is why, you know, here in the United States, people have a tendency to be more laid back about things. They don't get the reality of harm, crime, war, those sorts of things that happen in other countries, like, you know, like we do here. So those are kind of two points. I did want to backtrack on one thing to explain. A lot of people wonder, why didn't you just get up and leave? We couldn't. Back in the 60s, they didn't have that in place where there was an emergency withdrawal by your government to get you on a plane and get you out of the country. They didn't have that in place. And so what had happened at that time are all of our passports had expired because we were not planning any trips at that moment. My dad was about to get his secretary to renew them, but there wasn't any urgent need. So because we didn't have our passports in day, they wouldn't allow us to leave the country. It took almost 4 or a little over 4 months before our paperwork was in order. So we had to live under that scrutiny. And the assaults and things like that for all that time. So with that being said, it started out where we had police protection. But as it unfolded and became worse, the threats and the seriousness of the threats, my dad reached out to Dan Mitrione, which was a CIA operative, but he was working in Uruguay at the time, teaching counterinsurgency techniques to the military. And for those that don't understand what that is basically torture techniques for interrogating prisoners during situations. And since they had such a large culture of terrorists with the Tupamaros, he was there to try and help them gain control of their country again. And he was very much hated by the terrorists. And he eventually was murdered within the year after we left, sadly. But he was a very important part and took an important role in helping our family, and then getting the military to step in and take over our protection, the Uruguayan military. So
incredible, Kimberly. Like, again, from an outside perspective, this all sounds like, we only see in fiction films, but again, this absolutely did happen. And I just want to say, thank you for coming on the show to tell us your story and to bring awareness to what happened to you and your family. Now, when you finished interviewing your family and getting all the information you needed and publishing it, what were the initial reactions and reviews like when it was published?
That was what floored me, because one, I'm grappling with the fact that when my publisher told me the book went live, I physically got sick of, just at my stomach. I mean, my stomach just sank, because, here all this time I thought I was okay. And I really realized how the fear was there. And then I wondered, oh my gosh, my children, will they be okay? And so the going back to your question, what was the other half you were wanting me to explain? I lost my thought for a second there.
Absolutely. So ultimately, what was the reactions like in terms of like reviews that you got from your book?
Everyone was using a lot of the same type phrases of page turner, edge of the seat. They were as flabbergasted as you were about the story, because it's insane. It's absolutely insane what we experienced. And it isn't normal for a child to sneak a peek through curtains, because she's no longer allowed to go to school, and watching, the guards checking my father's car for bombs. That was like a 20-minute ordeal, because when they are checking for bombs, they are checking every square inch of the car, inside and out, that they possibly can. Anything that they can lift, pull away, whatever, that's what they were checking. And then what I was a sobering moment for me was realizing I asked my father one day, because I noticed that a different person started the car every day, and he wouldn't answer me at that time. As an adult, I learned it was the guards took turns on who was offering themselves as the guinea pig to start the car in case it blew up. So you think about it, they went to work just as traumatized in a way, because they didn't know if they were going to see their family again, if it was their day to start the car.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, kind of going back in time a little bit, when you were writing this book and looking back on what is achieved thus far, what would you say is your why? What motivated you to write this, beyond, finally able to tell your story? Would you say that at the end of the day, you wrote this story for you and your family, not for the thriller mystery audience?
It was my mother, like I had said, wanting us to tell our story, even though people wouldn't know us. Now, what added to it was I guess I wanted to let those terrorists know how much we didn't let them dictate our lives. Because it was horrific. They first started out robbing to get their money for their funds. And then because the organization got together in 1962 with Raul Sindek running the thing. It was more of a Marxist-Leninist type organization. And then by 1967, they started the kidnappings and the assassinations. So hence the title of my book, Carrasco 67, because Carrasco was the subdivision we lived in. 67 was the year that the worst was going down for us, and or started going south for us. And then within the year, we got the death sentence, because the year prior to all of this going on, all the foreign nationals were warned through a business association meeting not to go out after dark, things like that, for their own security. The Tupamaros looked at us foreigners as the reason behind lack of jobs, lack of positions in companies and things like that. But what they didn't want to realize was that by their being in Uruguay, they were bringing the companies and they were bringing the employment opportunities for the multitude. So it was a very distorted point of view. So with the story coming out, I wanted to fulfill my mother's dream of that. I wanted to, my kind of thumbs, flip up to the Tupamaros, because I held a lot of animosity towards them, because it cheated my childhood of normalcy.
Right.
To that extent. And the other thing was I love to write. And when my mother brought that up, that was when I started toying with it. I was like, why not? I am a writer. Why not write my own story? So that, and then the last important thing was what I said is I want people, because and dealing with my brother and seeing what he has gone through his whole life, the depression, the trials and tribulations that he has struggled with. I want people to learn that if early on you acknowledge, accept, it can be turned around. Unfortunately for him, we didn't know what the cause. We just assumed it was, you know, a typical teenager who doesn't want to grow up. We didn't realize the deep-seated problem. So I do want people to know that they can empower themselves if they have tragedies in their life.
Absolutely, Kimberly. Absolutely. Now, you also mentioned, in addition to writing in history, you're also a very big reader as well.
Yes.
So, who would you say is your role model author that may have played a role in how you wrote this story?
I I can't say that I have one, but I will say there was one author, and y'all are going to giggle at this one, because the author that I'm talking about was something that I started reading when I was 12, her books. They were Barbara Cartland, and she wrote the cheesiest little romance books. But the thing that what I was taking away from her books was learning how she wrote, in the sense of every book she wrote, her description of a room, of clothing, of a mindset, the feelings that the characters were feeling, it made you imagine yourself as being in that room. And I learned a lot from that, and that propelled me into to even upping my game in reading biographies and reading historical books. So because I had that, you know, inquisitive thing about history, what made people tick, what formed them, what their backstories were that made them be the person they were, especially because of my brother. So, you know, I wanted to be able to read the signs, and just, I like to figure out people. So that was one aspect. I do like the Frida McFadden thing. You know, I recently read one of her books, The Tenant, and it was, you know, the fact that it leaves you guessing till the end, those sorts of things, where you have storylines that leave you where you just can't imagine how it's going to end. And I felt this story had all of that. And so when I wrote it, I tried to do it in a manner where I did follow the timeline, but I did hold back on some of the key points to the end. There was one point that I wish I had put in the book, and so I will share it. And that is, the military had to make connections with all these different food sources, from finding a butcher that would work under the radar, someone that would handle vegetables, someone that would handle bread, all that. And they would take my mother's food order. She would call it in to the military and give them her food order, and they would go and get our food and bring it to us, because there was fear of us being poisoned to death. So there was that factor. We couldn't even go buy our own food. So it's You can't make this stuff up. It's insane.
You're absolutely right, Kimberly. You're absolutely right. So, as you were refining your writing to tell the story that is both factually true, but also play into, the genres that you're writing
Mhm.
in, ultimately, in your opinion, what makes your book stand out from others in the subgenres and main genres that you write in?
Well, the first thing is that it encompasses a lot of genre type things. It has the aspect of being based on a true story. Um, it has the aspect of extreme suspense, thrill, um, the the fact that fear is an underlying basis throughout the book. I wanted you, the reader, to be able to feel the tension and the fear that we lived in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for over 4 months. Um, it isn't normal for a child to have her own bodyguard.
Mm,
It isn't normal to, like I said, have our cars checked for bombs. It isn't normal to have to flee your school because the bomb dropped and we were running for our lives. Um, it's those sorts of things. People will not have that. I'm not saying that there hasn't been horrific true stories before, but pretty much the majority of what I wrote in the book is what happened. Um, that is why I interviewed my dad for 5 years, and I didn't want to rush it because I would re-ask him over and over and over to retell me the story of the conversations with the terrorists. And because of my patience, by the time the thing went to print, I almost had the conversations with the terrorists exactly as they took place, because it would start coming back. And, at first it was just kind of an overall. Then it became more precise and more precise and more precise.
mhm.
And so I'm really proud of how it turned out. I hope everyone will read it, enjoy it, and understand that, the lessons from it that you can, and to realize that this happened to a simple family that just was living the best years of their life, loving every minute we lived in Uruguay. It was absolutely a fabulous place to live until the terrorists started taking over and ruined it for many years.
Absolutely, Kimberly. Absolutely. And on a final note, before we end this incredible and very, very poignant interview, at the end of the day, what do you hope people will take away from your book and, most importantly, your story? Yours and your family story, I should say.
Yeah. I think one of the things was pay attention to my parents' role. Can you imagine what it would be like as a parent, the helplessness that you felt when you knew that no matter how hard you tried, you could not guarantee your child would be alive the next day? That is sobering.
Mm,
Absolutely sobering. So I got to learn how incredible my parents were. My father had been in the Brazilian army as well, so he knew his way around guns. And Dan Mitrione provided him armament, and then over time provided him enough so that we had some in every room of the house as well. So that is to show you how much he took an active role in our protection as well. It was a family will go to incredible lengths to self-preserve, and any family can do it. Any family would do it for their own. And so I want you to take away the fact that we weren't any more special than any other family, but we were a family that had an extreme great love for each other. My father eventually turned down some very prestigious role worldwide because he wasn't willing to take away from his time with our family. He was the ultimate and is the ultimate. It's someone that I just admire. He's 94. He'll be 94 this year. He's still with us. Sadly, my mother passed away. But she lived to see the book get published and was able to read it. She died the following year. I believe it was the following year. And so I was glad I made that part of the dream come through. She wants it to be a movie. That was one thing she wanted. And I'm like, whoa, I can only do so much. So, let's take baby steps here. Let's start out with a book. So I hope everybody will read it. I hope they will be kind and give positive reviews. That helps with that nasty little algorithm thing that Amazon loves to play with.
Yes.
So
very true, Kimberly. Very, very true. And on that note, viewers and listeners, we conclude this incredible, amazing author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I want to give a huge special thank you to Kimberly Blaine for coming on the show. And Kimberly, where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out and connect, as well as buy a copy of the book?
Right. My website is elainebrown.com, and Brown is spelled with a U, not a W. And I'm on Facebook, www.facebook.com/ElaineBrown00/. So I have that, and I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I have both my names. I have, Kimberly Brown Blaine, and I have the Elaine Brown. So I hope everyone will go out and read it. I also have a second psychological suspense thriller that was recently put out. So there are two to choose from too, but this one in particular obviously is close to my heart. I poured my heart into it. Let's just put it that way. And I hope you enjoy it.
And I will link all that down below in the description of this video, viewers and listeners. Thank you so much for joining us for another amazing episode here on the channel. A huge thank you to Kimberly Blaine for coming on the show, and hopefully not the last. If you would love to see Kimberly back on the show in a follow-up interview, like this video, comment down below, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all new episodes coming out this week and the subsequent weeks after. And as always, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, signing out, wishing you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Happy Monday, everybody, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Have a wonderful day, and goodbye.